The set of Katie Couric reports gleamed under the studio lights. It was the kind of polished environment where sharp questions were wrapped in polite tones, and uncomfortable truths were often softened for the sake of civility. Katie Couric, a veteran journalist, was known for her charm just as much as her piercing questions. But as she welcomed Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to the stage that evening, something felt off. Jasmine had barely taken her seat before Katie flashed her signature smile, a smile that had disarmed presidents and prime ministers. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, her voice velvet smooth, "let's talk credibility, shall we?" Jasmine leaned forward, fingers clasped, her eyes narrowing just slightly. That single movement shifted the air in the room. Everyone on set, producers, cameramen, even the makeup assistant hiding just off frame, felt it. This wasn't going to be a polite exchange. Not tonight. Katie pressed on, still smiling. "Some say you've gained popularity more for your viral moments than for actual policy achievements. Do you think that's fair?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to feel dangerous. Then Jasmine spoke. "I think it's fair to say that if I were a white man yelling at a camera about deficit spending, you wouldn't ask me that question." The smile vanished. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was electric. It wasn't just an answer, it was a detonation. Katie blinked, visibly thrown off for the first time in the interview. The control room scrambled, debating whether to cut to commercial. Twitter began buzzing within seconds. And Jasmine? She didn't flinch. Because she hadn't come to play safe. She had come to say what needed to be said. And this was only the beginning. Katie Couric straightened her stack of notes, but the shake in her hand didn't go unnoticed. She'd weathered storms with tougher guests, former presidents, foreign leaders, even war criminals. But Jasmine Crockett? Jasmine didn't posture. She aimed. And she had just fired her first shot. "Katie," Jasmine continued, her voice steady, her tone razor-sharp, "let's not pretend media framing is neutral. When a black woman speaks truth with power, she's labeled aggressive. But when a man postures and barks nonsense, he's called a maverick. What do you call that?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a mirror, and Katie saw her reflection in it. Couric's eyes narrowed slightly. "Congresswoman, with respect, this isn't about race or gender. It's about public service and transparency, what you've actually done since being elected." Jasmine didn't blink. "Oh, I've done plenty. But let's talk about who's been blocking bills that help working-class Americans. Let's talk about GOP lawmakers cutting food assistance while flying on private jets. Let's talk about student loan forgiveness being stalled by millionaires who never had to pay off a dime of debt." The audience, silent until now, began murmuring. A few gasps. One low whistle. Katie glanced at the control booth, where her producer was waving frantically. The interview was spiraling, evolving, into something raw, unscripted, and powerful. "But if you really want transparency," Jasmine said, leaning into the mic now, "let's talk about the questions you aren't asking." Katie furrowed her brow. "What do you mean? Where's the media pressure on Epstein's client list? Why are the same senators who scream about crime silent about Trump's convictions? And why, Katie, do powerful women like you stay quiet while the GOP tries to take us backward by 50 years? Dead silence. Even the hum of studio lights seemed to pause. Jasmine had flipped the script. And America was watching, live. Katie Couric had interviewed icons, but this felt different. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just answering questions, she was dismantling assumptions. In real time. On live television. The producers had stopped giving direction through Katie's earpiece. Not because they didn't want to, but because no one knew what to say. Jasmine had turned the interview into a reckoning. "Let me ask you something, Katie," Jasmine said, voice low but deliberate. "When was the last time you asked a male lawmaker if he was too loud, too visible, or too ambitious?" Katie blinked, caught off guard again. I don't remember. Exactly." Jasmine's gaze never wavered. "You remember the questions you're told to ask. The narratives you're expected to push. But you forget the silence around those who actually deserve scrutiny." The camera slowly zoomed in. It was supposed to frame Katie. It ended up capturing Jasmine instead, centered, controlled, unstoppable. And let's be honest, Jasmine added, if I had kept quiet, if I played the part you expected, none of this would go viral. It's only when a black woman dares to defy that people tune in. Katie tried to redirect. Well, we're here to talk about your policies. And I am, Jasmine said. I'm talking about a broken system. One that protects abusers, elevates frauds, and punishes women like me for not staying in line. The audience was silent. But the internet wasn't. Clips were already circulating. #JasmineUnfiltered was trending. Celebrities, journalists, even politicians were tweeting their reactions, some in awe, others in shock. But Jasmine wasn't here for any of them. She turned back to Katie, now fully in command. So ask your next question carefully. Because from this point forward, I won't just answer, I'll expose. And just like that, the interview wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. And the whole country was glued to the screen. Katie Couric took a deep breath. She glanced at her stack of questions, each one now feeling irrelevant, small, even. Across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, who no longer looked like a guest. She looked like the host of the conversation, and maybe of the moment. I came here, Jasmine began, knowing this wasn't going to be a soft landing. I knew you'd push, question, challenge. She paused. But I also came here with receipts. The camera panned to her hands, flipping open a folder. One headline after another: Texas redistricting raises constitutional questions, GOP silent as Epstein docs leak, Pam Bondi dodges accountability again. Jasmine held them up, not just for Katie, but for America. These aren't stories from fringe outlets, she said. These are from your colleagues. Your newsroom. And yet, where's the outrage? Katie tried to interject, we've covered Epstein. Not like this, Jasmine cut in, calm but lethal. You covered him when he was an easy villain. But now that names and power might be exposed. Silence. Hesitation. Deflection. The lights above seemed to glow hotter. Jasmine leaned forward. Why is it that when the GOP strips away healthcare, it's budget reform? But when we fight for it, it's radical socialism? The audience murmured. Even the camera operators stopped moving. This wasn't a soundbite, it was a firestorm. Katie straightened. Are you saying the media's complicit? Jasmine didn't flinch. I'm saying if you want to hold the powerful accountable, start with those who built the fortress around them. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Not because of the lights or cameras, but because Jasmine had just collapsed the distance between guest and truth-teller. Between politics and reality. Between what's said, and what's been hidden. And the world was still watching. Katie Couric blinked. Once, twice. She wasn't used to being on her heels. And yet, Jasmine Crockett had managed to shift the center of gravity in the room without raising her voice. No theatrics. Just the kind of unflinching clarity that makes silence feel louder than sound. You want to talk about credibility, Katie? Jasmine asked, locking eyes with her. Let's talk about whose voices we elevate, and whose we erase. Katie's notes lay untouched. Her years of experience, interviewing presidents, world leaders, media titans, suddenly felt miles away from this moment. Jasmine continued, Pam Bondi went on national TV and defended a man found liable for sexual abuse. Not just once. She defended him again and again, while claiming moral high ground. The screen behind them, previously showing stock footage, flashed headlines: Epstein associates remain unnamed, Trump allies push to seal court records, Bondi, there's nothing there. Jasmine pointed without looking. You see those? That's not just silence. That's protection. That's complicity wrapped in denial. Katie finally found her voice. But Jasmine, to play devil's advocate, some would say. Some. Jasmine shot back, not missing a beat. You mean the same, some, who looked the other way while a sitting president mocked survivors, manipulated districts, and danced around tax fraud? That, some? The studio, once bustling with quiet producers and cue cards, now stood frozen. Even the audio tech's hands hovered above the mixer, unmoving. This isn't about partisanship, Jasmine said. It's about power, and who's willing to challenge it. Katie stared. For a moment, she wasn't a journalist. She was a witness. And the witness said nothing. Because sometimes, silence is the only thing left when the truth arrives fully formed. Katie Couric shifted in her seat. Not to regain control, but because Jasmine Crockett had just taken it. All of it. The stage. The tempo. The terms. The crowd didn't applaud, they didn't even blink. They absorbed. Jasmine sat upright, hands folded, voice unwavering. You know what I find interesting, Katie, she began, her tone like the beginning of a verdict. When we talk about moral decay in this country, it's always aimed at the poor. The struggling. The black. The immigrant. Never at the men hiding in penthouses or behind sealed court records. Katie hesitated, eyes scanning her team for support, but there was none. The monitors in the control room had frozen on Jasmine's face, calm, unshaken, and deadly precise. Epstein? Jasmine continued. Wasn't just a monster. He was a network. And every time someone deflects, like Bondi, like the GOP, they keep that network alive. The silence deepened. She turned slightly toward the camera. Now, she wasn't just talking to Katie. She was talking to us. You can't talk about justice, she said, while protecting predators. You can't pretend to care about children while sealing the files. And you definitely can't sell integrity while clinking glasses at Mar-a-Lago. Katie finally spoke, but barely. What are you saying, exactly? Jasmine's reply was a whisper and a hammer. I'm saying they know exactly what they're doing. And just like that, the interview had ceased being an interview. It became a reckoning. America was no longer asking, is she right? They were asking, why haven't we heard this sooner? Katie Couric tried to regain footing, but the ground had already shifted. Jasmine wasn't debating anymore. She was testifying. Not to defend herself, but to indict a system that had long confused wealth with worth. You know what's wild? Jasmine leaned forward, her voice calm but razor-edged. Every time a black woman raises her voice, even a little, they call it aggressive. But when white men silence victims, it's just policy. Katie blinked. The control room's glass separated them from the tension but did nothing to buffer it. Even the floor manager had stopped counting cues. Why didn't your party push for the Epstein files when it mattered? Jasmine asked. Katie stiffened. I'm not part of any party, Congresswoman. Jasmine smiled, not unkindly. Then let me rephrase. Why didn't America's gatekeepers demand transparency? Why did survivors have to scream into the void while billionaires got televised weddings? The audience wasn't just silent. They were frozen. Phones weren't recording anymore, not out of disinterest, but out of reverence. Jasmine reached under her seat and pulled a folder. Thin. Unassuming. But its presence was thunderous. These are redacted excerpts from the Epstein court proceedings, she said. Redacted by the same DOJ that Republicans claim is too woke. Katie blinked again, slower this time. Jasmine continued, voice now soft, as if holding back centuries of fury. You protect a man like that long enough, you become the monster you're shielding. And with that, she slid the folder across the table. It didn't matter what was inside. America already knew what was coming. And Katie Couric wasn't ready. Katie stared at the manila folder as if it were ticking. A threat? No. A revelation. Jasmine didn't blink. "Open it," she said gently. Katie hesitated, then flipped the cover. Inside, timelines, initials, sealed depositions. Jasmine didn't even have to speak, the silence spoke for her. One paper bore a name even Katie couldn't mask her reaction to. "Wait, this was signed by someone you've interviewed. Someone you defended." Katie's lips parted, but no sound came out. "You asked me why people don't trust institutions anymore?" Jasmine continued. "Because the same hands shaking on camera are redacting names behind closed doors." The room was so quiet, even the click of the document hitting the table felt like thunder. A producer behind the glass mouthed, "Cut?" But no one moved. Jasmine's tone remained steady. "This isn't a gotcha moment. It's a mirror. The question is, do you like what you see?" Katie finally looked up. She was pale. Speechless. And suddenly, small. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't lean in. She simply existed in her truth, and that truth filled every inch of the studio. "You wanted a headline," Jasmine added. "Here it is, we protected a predator for access. And now, the access isn't worth the price." And in that moment, the interview ended. Not because time ran out, but because the story changed. And this time, Jasmine was the one writing it. The silence in the studio was no longer tension, it was reckoning. Katie Couric slowly leaned back in her chair, her notes now useless. Her eyes scanned the pages Jasmine had brought, and with each word, her once unshakable poise started to fracture. Jasmine looked over, not smug, not triumphant, just resolute. "You asked for facts," she said calmly. "But what you didn't ask is why these facts were buried for so long." Katie opened her mouth, then stopped. What could she say? That she didn't know? That she didn't want to know? Jasmine continued, her voice unflinching. "This isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein. This is about the systems that protect men like him. The media gave him charm. The courts gave him cover. The elites gave him invitations." And then she turned directly to the camera. "To every survivor watching, your pain was never inconvenient." They were. Behind the glass, producers froze. The control room didn't cut to commercial. No music rolled. Because every eye was glued to one woman who didn't flinch. Jasmine went on. "While you all sat around tables deciding what would upset the viewers, girls were being trafficked. While political operatives spun, victims suffered." She turned back to Katie. "You wanted to ask about my tone? About my outrage? Honey, I borrowed this fury. It belongs to every woman who never got her interview." Katie blinked, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I didn't know." Jasmine's response? Simple. Sharp. True. "You didn't ask." Jasmine sat still, letting the silence do its job. The studio, once polished and controlled, now felt raw and exposed. Even Katie Couric, a veteran of countless interviews, looked like she'd just witnessed something seismic, and maybe she had. Producers stood behind the glass, not daring to move. The teleprompters had gone blank. The control room wasn't cutting away. No one blinked. Katie finally broke the silence. "Congresswoman Crockett, do you think this changes anything?" Jasmine turned slowly to face her. "Not everything. But maybe enough." Her voice was calm, but the weight behind her words was undeniable. "We don't fix this by pretending it's new. We fix it by owning what's been protected, ignored, and enabled for decades." Katie lowered her eyes. Jasmine continued. "I didn't come here to burn bridges. I came here because I'm tired of building them over graves." A pause. "And if this costs me favor, airtime, or comfort, so be it. Comfort never saved anyone. Truth might." There was nothing more to say. Jasmine stood up, buttoned her blazer, and walked out, not in retreat, but in purpose. Each step echoed louder than the next. And behind her, in that once polished studio, something had undeniably shifted. Katie sat in stunned silence, staring at the door Jasmine had just passed through. She smiled, finally understanding the irony. She didn't change the story, she muttered. She changed the rules. So let me be crystal clear, we're done shrinking ourselves to fit into spaces that were never built for truth. We're done letting narratives get twisted while the facts sit in silence. And if anyone thought I'd walk into this interview and just smile back without saying what needed to be said, well, they don't know who they're dealing with. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the standard. So whether you agree, disagree, or just don't know where to stand, know this, I'm standing on the truth. And I'm not moving. Not for ratings. Not for comfort. Not for anyone.